All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Aguilar from College of Marin PD in California, 26 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome, Chief Aguilar. Thank you so much for your time and being here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here with you. I've been a follower of yours for a while, and I certainly appreciate your message of wellness. And I think that's something that's very important to anyone and everyone, but especially to our law enforcement community. It's important that we are aware of wellness and how it affects us and those around us.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate your support and I appreciate you being here and talking about wellness. And I know it's something that's important to you. And I was hoping that we could start with a little bit of background for anyone who doesn't know you. How did you get started in law enforcement? Maybe give us like a couple minutes of a background on you.
Certainly. Well, I am an immigrant, first generation. I was from Mexico. I came to the United States as a young person, I was a teenager, and I did not speak any English whatsoever. So that was one of the first challenges that I faced in my new life. I struggled with school, and I started working, fairly, at a young age. But none of the jobs really satisfy me. And then I came across some police officers who were very, obviously, they were the cool police officers with all the tactical gear and, cool stories. And it was, it kind of planted that seed in my mind. But then again, I could not speak English. I did not finish my education. So it was kind of a long way to becoming a police officer. But eventually, after many years, I had a gap of about 10 years of doing, I used to work in the hospitality industry. And eventually, I finally said, you know what, I would love to be a police officer, and kind of time's wasting. So let's start doing that. So I started applying, and this is the late 1990s, mind you. So different environment, different time frame, right? But I applied to several departments, and eventually I was hired by the San Rafael Police Department here in Marin County. We're just about 20 minutes north of San Francisco, and it's a very welcoming, very diverse community. And I just fell in love with it. We have, if you know anything about the Bay Area, we are just in a blessed area with beautiful weather all year round, hiking trails. We have the beach nearby. So it's a fantastic environment. And I just started working here in San Rafael. I did that for 25 years. I had all kinds of assignments, starting with working patrol, and then I became a street crimes officer, investigating drug dealing and that kind of thing, minors, street level crimes. Eventually, I became a detective and a field training officer. And then I was a member of FBI Safe Streets Task Force for the North Bay Area. And then at some point, I started promoting. I became a corporal and then a sergeant. And then I did that for 25 years. And the one thing that everybody says, and I'm sure you've heard it from some of your other guests, is that time flies when you're having fun. For me, it felt like I had just started my career, but the 25 years went by very fast. The next thing I knew, I had completed 25 years in San Rafael, and the opportunity came up to here at College of Marin, and I decided to take the plunge. And I've been here for 1 year, and I just love the college environment. And we can talk about it a little bit later on. Education is very important to me.
Mhm.
I felt that becoming a chief of police at a community college was very much in line with my values. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's me.
Thank you for sharing that. I actually did not know a lot of what you just shared. We had met offline a little bit just to, kind of meet each other a little bit. But I didn't know that you were an immigrant and that you came here as a young teenager and didn't know any English at all. I would imagine that that is really challenging to come to a brand new country where you don't know anybody and you don't know the spoken language. What do you think gave you that drive and perseverance to learn the language and to now be a police officer?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with the values that were instilled in me by my family, and those values were, you have to work hard, you have to um, be very dedicated to um, what you believe it's very important to you. And what I really appreciate in my family was that nothing was ever said, "Hey, we're this family and this is what we're gonna do." It was more of a, allow me to explore certain things and follow my own path. And I think that's very important as a leader to show somebody the way, but not lead somebody by the nose or anything like that. You have to coach them, kind of help them develop their own way, and that's what was given to me. So, when I first came to the United States, I was very thankful for the opportunity, and I had to really um, study. I had to study hard. I studied at community college, and that's where I learned English. So that's why a community college is very important to me,
Yeah.
right? This is where people come to, like, at the College of Marine, where I work, people come here to learn English. We have, English as a second language classes. We also have a lot of community classes to enrich, the education. We have art history classes and photography and all kinds of other classes, as well as classes that will help student transfer to a four-year university,
Mm.
and also obviously classes to learn a trade, whether it's auto shop or nursing or anything like that. So I think it's important to recognize the value of a community college and how it helps you reach your own goals. And again, for me, it was about learning the language first and foremost. And I feel that I learn every day because there's still some words that I see and I'm like, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Yeah, I have some funny stories of you know, as a rookie police officer, getting on the radio and saying something, but it came across as something completely opposite. So afterwards,
Imagine.
the locker room talk is like, "Hey, kid, we can't say that on the radio." And I was like, "Hey, it's like it was the wrong emphasis."
Understood. That's so
So
funny.
it's
Well,
yeah, but it's we have to always strive to, work in whatever it is that you're trying to get better at. Just, don't give up and continue doing that.
yeah, and what a really cool full circle moment for you to say, like, hey, like I came to this country, I couldn't speak English. I started learning English at a community college, and that really helped me to develop the skills that were required to enter into this profession. And now I'm chief of police at a community college. I think that is such a cool story of perseverance and hard work. And so thank you for sharing that with us.
Of
I
course.
also was really interested in what you said earlier about how you saw a couple police officers and you thought that they were just so cool and that you were like, I want to be that one day. And sometimes I think that we forget that you know, you have the ability to inspire other people by just being who you are and living a life of, honor and treating people well. And I had someone the other day on the podcast, and they were like, "My daughter thinks you're a big deal." And I was like, "I think that I am not a big deal at all, but that is such a huge compliment. Thank you." And I think that you forget that just by doing the right things and working hard, there are other people who look up to you. And it's almost a responsibility to make sure that you're, doing the right things because people are looking at you for how to be or, aspiring to be you one day.
Absolutely. One of the things that um, my mentors at the San Rafael Police Department told me was that our interactions with the people might be brief, and for us, you might just move on to a next call for service, but that person, that citizen, or not citizen, but the person that you have interacted with will remember that. That might be the first time they've ever met a police officer or had to speak with a police officer, and your behavior, your interaction, will be the only point of reference they may have with law enforcement. So it's important to be professional and be yourself, but always be professional.
Yeah. Well, and who knows, maybe it'll inspire a kid to enter into this career one day, and want to be like you. So, yeah, I think that that is such a cool story. You had told me offline, and I wanted to bring this up, and because I didn't really know what you meant by this, but you said that you were the poster child of being reckless. What what does that mean?
So it was in the context of wellness and taking care of yourself. So when I was, and going back to, becoming a police officer, right? So, I had to wait, learn the language, have the education, so I became a police officer, not in my early 20s or even my late 20s. I was already over 30 years old when I became a police officer. And I was just delighted to have landed the job in the place where I was working at. And I was so committed that I neglected myself.
Mm,
Anytime somebody, the sergeant would ask for overtime, somebody that needs to stay over, hold over because whatever reason, I was the first one that was saying yes. Put me in, coach. I'm staying. You need somebody to work on a Sunday. You need somebody to work the holiday. I'm there. So I continuously gave a lot of myself, always signing up for the overtime, volunteering for anything and everything. It was very good because it gave me a lot of experience. It helped me, develop, learn the job as I was, again, I was a new officer. But in retrospect, that hurt me because I was neglecting, my personal life. I was neglecting, those around me that care about me. I was neglecting my son, so I missed some events that, the job is already hard enough working, nights and weekends. But on top of that, I was volunteering for a lot of things where I didn't need to necessarily volunteer, and that caused me to miss some of my son's events, football games and different things, and also with my family, my immediate family and my extended family. So that was just absolutely reckless, and also just not sleeping enough. I think now as I'm more into the wellness sphere, I know that sleep is such a crucial part for our well-being, physically and mentally and emotionally. And I was just, getting by with 2 hours of sleep. And also just a horrible diet. I was, because I was so committed, I was there. I would always stop by a fast food restaurant or just not, skip meals, or not eat any meals for several hours. So, yeah, I was just absolutely reckless when it came to that. So,
Yeah.
uh, and I think it's important, as a chief of police now and as a leader, I've definitely encouraged people not to do that. I'm vulnerable. I'll fall on the sword and say I did that, but don't do it if you can, if you're able to, take care of yourself, get enough sleep, eat healthy, and set some boundaries. Say no if you don't have to. Obviously there's going to be some times where there's going to be critical incidents and we're going to need everybody to respond or to stay for a very long shift. But if you can avoid it, or if it can be avoided, it's okay to set some boundaries and say no.
Yeah. What you just said is so relatable. It's such a double-edged sword, because on one end of things, I did the exact same thing. When I was first starting in my career, I was working 18-hour days every single day, no weekends. I was like, I'm going to outwork everybody. And because I'm going to outwork everybody, that means that I'm going to get the opportunities over everybody else because I might not have, you know, I might not have been doing this as long as everybody else, but I'm definitely going to outwork everybody else. And I sacrificed my wellness, I sacrificed my home life and relationships. And on one end of it, it's kind of what you said. It's like on one end, it's like you do learn a lot quickly and you do advance quicker than maybe you would. And I took a lot of pride in my work ethic and my ability to dedicate myself to my craft. But I also wouldn't recommend it for anybody else. It's like yeah, I think that there is, and as much as, maybe balance is never perfect, I think that there is room and space. And I sometimes question, could I have advanced even further if I wasn't so tired, if I wasn't so burnt out, like could I have maybe absorbed more information? Could I have learned more if I wasn't running on empty the entire time? I don't know. It is that kind of double-edged sword because you don't recommend that for other people, but you understand the drive and kind of the thirst for, being an expert in your field and it really did. I mean, I sacrificed a lot of things that I now retrospectively wish that I wouldn't have done. And so you had said to me earlier, and I thought this was so true. And you said this just now too, but you said wellness is about boundaries. And I am the worst at that. Like I am a yes girl, just like you said, put me in, coach. Like I'm the one, like let's do it. If anyone's gonna do it, it's gonna be me, and I'm gonna do it well. And I have had to learn to set boundaries and to like say no. And that is a really hard thing to do because you don't want to be known as a person who says no. You don't want to be known as a person maybe who's not easy to work with. But you have to be able to take care of yourself and you have to find those times to sleep and to exercise and to decompress. You cannot go at 1,000,000% for years at a time. You are going to burn out. And so there has to be those boundaries and those opportunities to take a step back. And so I would love if you talked a little bit about maybe how you came to that understanding that wellness is about boundaries and maybe how you were able to find that space throughout your career so that you do have maybe that healthier balance.
Absolutely. Well, I think for me, again, wellness is about boundaries and being able to say no. Now, we are first responders, right? We are going to have to respond when there's an emergency. Um, we're going to be there. So I think it's very important to be clear about that. I had a rookie officer that I had talked about boundaries and saying no, and telling them, hey, don't feel obligated just because you're the last, person on the seniority list to say no all the time. So we had an incident where there was, I needed everybody to stay, and this young person actually tells me, I have to go, and I'm like, no, you know, this is not the time to do that, okay?
Mhm.
This is a critical incident. I need everybody here until further notice, period, the end. So it's important to keep that in perspective, right? We're
Right.
first responders, um, but, in the totality of things, boundaries, it's about, excuse me, you got to have two sets of values, right? The boundaries have to be aligned with your values as a person, but also with the values of the institution that you're working with, or your department, being a police department, or fire department, or any other institution that you're dealing with. And those values have to match. For example, for me, my values are justice, service, equity, dignity. So those are a lot of times when I said my boundaries are, within that frame.
Mm.
And as you create those boundaries, because they're going to protect your time, your wellness, the way you're going to engage with people, how you perform in your job, those also translate to the overall institution. When it's very clear what my values are, and they have to be in alignment with the institution. So, for example, here at the college, well, my values is education, right? Education service. So I know that we're here to ensure students are successful. So as long as we can, match those values together, you're going to have a very positive culture. And there's going to be some times, and it's going to, kind of be, um, like an ecosystem, right? Where people are that work with you understand that you're setting up boundaries, not because you're not a team player, but because you need some time to, get some rest, sleep, um, sharpen the mind. And then your teammates, right, your other, co-workers are also aware of that, and they can fill in for you. And then when they need the time off and they need to say no and respect the boundaries, you can be there for them. So it's important for it to be a whole a cultural alignment between the individuals and the group and the community as a whole.
Yeah. And I appreciate that distinction of like, hey, I want to make it clear, like, there are times when, like, you got to be here, but in maybe the non-emergency sense, like there's space. And one of the things that I had to learn to do, and this is maybe just a simple thing, is like set more boundaries in my personal life. I felt like my personal life was one suffering. And so I had to set boundaries of the sense like these are the non-negotiable things that I am going to do on a consistent basis within like my family unit. And so making sure that I prioritize time. But the second thing was also prioritizing my wellness. And so it was like, okay, when I'm not working, and for me, it's a little bit different. Obviously, we're in different career paths, and I set my schedule. And what I was doing is I would set aside wellness time for myself and say, okay, this is like the time I have every day to go and work out or, to do whatever that wellness thing was for me for that day. And then I would start like booking meetings on top of that because I didn't want to say no or my schedule was filling up and I didn't want to like push it out 2 weeks. And so I'd be like, oh, like, yeah, sure, I'm available. And I would sacrifice my own wellness time for that. And so what I realized is I cannot show up. There's two things I realized. One, how hypocritical of me to be on this platform saying take care of yourself and that it's important to find that space, and then me not be doing that myself. And I really believe in authenticity. But the second thing is I cannot show up in the best way for you or for whoever I'm working with if I'm feeling terrible because I'm not taking care of myself or if I'm burnt out. And so there were just times where I had to take a look at my schedule and say, okay, where are the spaces that I can find that time to carve out and then make those things a priority? And I think that that is a key component to wellness is what are your priorities? And maybe like list them out like top priority all the way down to like, most important to least important. Then how can you identify, okay, what are the spaces that are non-negotiables for me that I can carve into my work schedule so that they're not competing for time, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It makes perfect sense. And I think as we progress, as we grow as leaders within our field, it's important to um, influence our institution or our police department or whomever you're working with, right? We may not necessarily be in alignment, our priorities as a person with our institution or our police department. So it's important that we work towards making them align. And obviously, it's going to take a while, but I think if we, as leaders, we work towards, recognizing that and making sure that my list of priorities are not the same, but at least similar to the institution. Because I think that's where we find friction, right? And that's where there might be some areas where there might be eventually be a clash. So it's important to find out what those blind spots are and then try to fix them and try to work around them, before there's a crisis. So it's one of those things that it's important to be on the lookout for that. And it's these wellness. I'm sure you've heard this before. It's more of an art than a science, right? We have to make assessments in a daily manner, and find out what's working, what's not working, and then just kind of reassess over and over because as human beings, one day we might be in a fantastic space, and other days, for whatever reason, we're not. So,
Mm.
important to keep an open mind about that, and just try to, continue be a continuous work. It's not a destination, but rather a you know a a path or a journey. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for. See, that's the
Yes.
just second language thing. I was looking for a journey, a path.
I actually really appreciate you saying that. That's actually not something that we've talked about a lot on this podcast. And it's this idea that we are ever evolving. And so our training, our wellness, all the things have to also evolve as we evolve, right? And so to your point, wellness is not going to look the same
Mhm.
for you when you're 20 as it does when you're 50, or it might not look the same in the academy as it does maybe when you're about to retire. There's things that are going to influence you, and that could be either maybe the stress of the job,
Mhm.
or maybe you're starting a family at this time, and so now you have a whole lot of added things going on. Maybe you're trying to promote and that looks different. Maybe you're just getting older. And, and so I think giving yourself grace, still having a commitment to your own well-being and still prioritizing it and trying to be proactive, like you said, but also understanding, I've had so many conversations um, with individuals who are, maybe a little bit further along in their career and maybe didn't prioritize, wellness for a while. And they get back in the gym and they're like, I'm going to lift like I did when I was on the SWAT team when I was 26 years old. And then they were like, yeah, and then I injured myself. And you're like, yeah, like,
Correct.
and I think we all want to feel like there's maybe like we're always on, but it's not
Mhm.
always going to be that way. And so I really appreciate you saying you've never arrived. There's no destination. It's a journey, and we're evolving always. And so the things that we do are also going to evolve. And when I was earlier in my career, I was in the studio at like 5:30 a.m. every day. I would do a 2 hour practice, really, really hard, strenuous for 2 hours. And then I would go and work in a 15-hour day.
Wow.
Or 18-hour day or whatever. And I was basically living out of my car. I've actually never shared this before, but I was not actually literally living out of my car, but because I was working so much, I had to bring like changes of clothes. I had to bring my own food. Like I was driving from studio to studio to studio to private lesson to workshop to whatever it was that I was doing. And everything that I did, I would get paid like $20, So like by the end of the day, I had made like $100 and I had, worked all day just like living out of my car and rinse and repeat every single day. I did that. And now my wellness looks very different. I'm not in there doing something strenuous for 2 hours. I'm more of like a 45 minute, and we try to like get as much as we can in like a shorter period of time. And I'm not working, 18-hour days eating out of my car anymore, which is good because in Phoenix it's very hot in the summer and it's not very fun to do that. But things look different at different times in your life, and give yourself grace and understand where you are today might look different than where you are tomorrow, and that's okay. You did mention to me that wellness was something that grounded you. And so I'm curious how wellness played a role into your life and career, and what are some of the things that helped you along the way to now, 26 years later, still having some gas left in the tank?
Well, as we spoke earlier, I was just very reckless during my first years in my career. Again, just doing bad things, right? Not sleeping enough, not eating enough, or not eating well. Um, so that's something that I just did it, and it was, a lot of my coworkers were doing it too. So it wasn't, we kind of fed of each other, right? So it wasn't a big deal. Um, and the way it kind of all came crashing down for me was, I started having, it was affecting my personal relationships, but it was also affecting my health. Without getting to a lot of details, I was diagnosed with a very severe illness that, basically I couldn't go to work, and I was in the hospital for, months at a time. So that was definitely something that changed. When you are given those news, it kind of changes everything.
Yeah.
And, it's almost like a moment where like a divine intervention or something, right? Where all of a sudden everything that you knew was wrong, and you're not sure if you're gonna come out on the other side of this event. So it definitely, um, rattles the foundation, and it just, I made a point to, change my behavior, change my outlook in life. That's basically what it came down to, just uh, being um, being diagnosed with an illness that was just very serious. I've overcome it, so I think obviously I'm back at work and doing the job. So but it definitely changes your mind. And I think it's important. I want to share this because I don't want people to not take care of themselves until you have a very bad health outcome. I think it's important to take care of yourself. The sooner, the better. So that way you don't have to be given, a medical diagnosis that is just gonna shatter your whole life and turn your life upside down. So it's
Yeah.
important that we talk about it. And the message sometimes, I was told that before, but I didn't listen. Because sometimes we are like that, right? People will tell you, "Oh, don't do that," and I'm like, "Oh, I feel fine. Don't worry. That I'll sleep it off when I'm dead, or stuff like that." So and we keep on pushing, pushing, pushing until something bad happens. So I think it's important, if somebody like me that are in a position of authority and trust, that to share my experience, so people can make the self-determination that it's probably not a good idea to do that. Maybe I should definitely sleep more. Maybe I should definitely watch what I eat. Be careful. Follow whatever the case might be, to follow those things to take care of yourself, and be a better person, be a better partner, and have a lengthy, helpful, lengthy life.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. And I'm so glad that you overcame it and that you are here today. And, I think that anyone who's listening can relate to the message or the idea that, like, we've all been through something where we had to be more reactive. And then after the fact, we're like, man, I wish I was more proactive, or we've all been in that position where someone tells us to do something who is probably older, wiser, and knows what they're talking about. And we're like, like, it's okay, we don't have to do it. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's those big moments in our lives where we're kind of faced with that of like, oh, okay, I get it now. And it is important to be proactive. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm curious if you think that that moment or that experience helped to make you a better leader so that now you can show up for other people and share that experience to help them to hopefully not, make some of the same, I'll do them in quotes of like mistakes of not, being proactive with their wellness.
Well, I think it was a that particular event was a one of the things that helped me concentrate on wellness, but I don't think it was the only one. I think
Mm.
overall it was a combination of multiple factors.
Yeah.
I think the environment that you work in. I can tell you that my former department uh, definitely did spend a lot of emphasis in wellness and taking care of their officers. So I think it was something that helped me. So that plus just some mentors and some family friends that were telling me, yeah, you need to, take care of yourself. Maybe not work as many graveyards, because your circadian rhythm, is affected. Even though you might sleep during the daytime, it affects your health. So I think it was multiple factors along the way, though, and that's why it's important to remind everybody that this is a journey.
Mm.
And although I had a kind of a big bump on the road, I think at some point I was probably gonna end up on the right side of taking care of myself, because of all the different factors that were kind of coming up at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just important to recognize that they're there, right? Sometimes, again, going back to the whole, uh, yeah, I know my body, I know what I can take, or the peer pressure, right? So it's important to just recognize, the signs and the advice, and you will make the decision when you're ready. I think that's also another thing to be mindful of, because I think, I was already kind of heading into that path of wellness, taking care of myself. But I think I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to give up the working the graveyard shift. I mean, I love working the graveyard shift. That's when all the bad things happen, right? But I kind of realized that it really, if I could choose not to work as many graveyard shifts, maybe I should not do that. So,
Yeah.
but you got to do it when you're ready. So, um, uh, just I think as long as we can be supportive, and help somebody, give people information, they'll eventually make their own decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, it's interesting that you said that because I've had a lot of conversations where, you'll hear people within other organizations that are like, this person will never do it. Will never take care of themselves. Like, and there's almost this like this attitude of like, well, why do we need it if they're not going to take advantage of it? But then you hear these stories where it's like, well, maybe they don't need it right now, or maybe they don't think they need it right now. Maybe they're not ready for it yet.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that you can't still have conversations. That doesn't mean that you still can't have resources or make it available and known that like, hey, like if and when you are ready or if and when you do need these things, here they are, because there might be that moment, a moment similar to what you experienced, or maybe something that happens on the job that now is the time that you have that like, oh, okay, maybe now I'm gonna see what this wellness thing is all about. And so it goes back to what we said about being proactive, not just personally, but organizationally. How can you be a little bit more proactive and make sure people are aware of the things that are available and could be useful? And you and I had talked a little bit about some of the pillars of wellness that you've been focusing on. And of course, we talked about physical, we talked about mental health and the importance of that. But one of the things I thought that was very, very interesting that I have never really had anyone put it in this perspective before, but you talked about this idea of educational health and how educational or education can be a part of wellness. And I know it's really important to you. So I was hoping that you could give some insights into why you think that education is a component of wellness.
Oh, thank you. This is my favorite part, and I'm trying to contain myself, but you know, it's important that the mind that uh, we use critical thinking, right? But critical thinking is not something that there really isn't a manual of how to critical think, right? And when we're growing up, our parents, we learn from our parents, from our immediate surroundings, right? Teachers, students, nannies, whatever the case might be. Um, but not everybody has the same accessibility to the same educational material. So sometimes, we just don't have enough of that information. So it's up to us to be responsible to seek it out, right? To sharpen the mind, if you will. And it takes different formats, right? It's not about a formal degree. So I have a master's, after so many years, like I was telling you earlier, it took me forever to learn English. And then on top of that, it took me another several years to get my BA. And then it took me a few more years to get my master's. But along the way, I learned so much stuff about so many different things. And it's important to um, that formal education is not for everybody. I recognize that not everybody needs to get a 4 year degree or a master's or a PhD, but it's important that we are continuously learning about different things, and we can do that by reading. I think that's one of the things that it's missing, especially in the younger generations now. I asked people recently, like, what's the last book you read for pleasure? Not a part of an assignment, not something for school or for work. When's the last time the last book you read for pleasure? And people just don't read as much anymore. People, they watch videos. They're like, you talk about some classical novel, and then, well, I saw the movie. I'm like, Well, you saw the movie, but there's a difference between watching a movie and
Mhm.
reading a novel. I think that's something that unfortunately I like to encourage people to do is to read. And reading, it affects your brain. You comprehend ideas differently. It exercises your brain. You're able to, it hits differently from watching a YouTube video or anything like that. So I think reading is very important. Also, look behind your field, right? So we're in law enforcement, right? And a lot of times when I was looking for a master's program, so a lot of people were like telling, suggesting, oh, well, you should get a master's in, you know, leadership, or perhaps, organizational leadership, or perhaps, some criminal justice or administration of justice, or something like that. I chose a master's in public policy analysis just because I wanted that quantitative challenge, being able to look at the things that I never really had a chance to look. So kind of a broader view. And it was a challenge, but it's important to look at different challenges, and not accept the easy things, right? Not accept the status quo. It's important to push beyond your comfort zone, and and do things on your own, where nobody's going to judge you. Nobody's going to know if you pick up a book and you read it and you didn't really quite understood what it meant. You can reread it again. You don't even have to share it with anybody. You can, read it, and that's, some of the best books are read over and over. I have several books that I read that, I make notes on the side. I reread them, sometimes. So it's just, it's one of those things that sharpens the mind.
Yeah.
I think I definitely encourage people to do that. Also, the arts, they're it's so important to, have a creative um, outlet. Whether if it's not reading, then painting or something else that's gonna just make you be creative. Because it stimulates your thoughts, and you're able to look at things in different perspectives, right? Look at the perspective of other people. And for us in law enforcement, that we're serving the public, it's important to have that perspective of other groups, other people that are part of our community. So definitely, I could never experience what, somebody in another country experienced, or, on the other side of the world. So the best way I can do that is by reading a book by an author from that part of the world. And that at least kind of brings it home, and I can read it, understand somebody else's perspective. So those are the two main things that I like to encourage people to do, is to read, and to push, to read, and to also push for some creative outlet. And again, a community college is a fantastic place where you can get, take classes on art history or photography or video editing or painting or anything like that. They're affordable. They're close to your place. Wherever you live, there's always going to be a community college nearby, and you can learn so much stuff in there.
Yeah. Well, I love the perspective of education being a part of wellness. And I think that the more you the more you learn, the more empowered you are. And I love that you talked about having different perspectives because I think that that's what it does. You're meeting maybe other people in the class that you're taking, or maybe you're reading a book that has a different perspective than maybe you ever thought, because we tend to have a one-track mind. Like we kind of have like what we're used to and what we know. And so when you start expanding that, you're like, oh, I never thought of it this way. Or maybe there is a different or better way of doing something, And so now you're equipped with all these different perspectives and tools that you can put in your toolbox or your tool belt or however you want to say it for later. And I think that um, the more training I've done, I feel just more equipped to handle different situations. And I love that you said to learn maybe outside of the scope of what you're doing specifically, because I do think that that helps a lot. And you never know what skills translate. Like there have been times where I've done things where I'm like, I will never use this in my entire life. And then 5 years later, I'm using it. I'm like, okay, well, now I know how to do it because but I never ever thought I would use it, and I am now. And so I really appreciate your perspectives on education. And one of the things that popped out to me while you were talking about reading and doing something artistic versus like watching a movie. Anyone who's listening to this can relate. How many of us have sat to watch a movie? What are you doing the whole time?
You're just sitting most of the time, right?
Yeah, or you're thinking about stuff or you're on your phone. I more times than not, I'll go, from hanging out with family or whatever. Everyone is sitting, the TV's on or a movie's on, and everyone is scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, right? And so it's like you are so distracted the entire time. You're not actually sitting there and learning. I actually really like documentaries because I feel like, at least if I'm consuming, I'm like learning something.
Sure.
But I try my best to not have my phone if I'm going to do that, right? And I'm guilty of also, sitting and scrolling. But when you're reading, you're forced to be present. If you're painting or writing or doing something creative, maybe you're doing ceramics or whatever that is, you're forced to be present. It's the same thing when you are working out. You are like in that moment, you're not sitting on your phone. And so, how can we find more and maybe different ways to be present in the moment so that we can further our development, whether that's physically, mentally, educationally, emotionally. Because when we are constantly distracted and escaping and numbing, we're not able to grow because we are trying to disconnect from reality or we're living in the past. And so, how can we find that forward trajectory through more moments of presence?
Well, I think you hit on the head when you talk about escaping, and unfortunately, our mobile devices are just a gateway to do that, right? So it's so easy, and to just be transported somewhere else, just within your hand, you have it, right? You have the mobile device with you, and it can take you wherever you want to be transported. Um, and I think there is about having breaks of your mobile device. I know people now are actually very intentionally not bringing a cell phone to the dinner table, or not using a cell phone for the first hour of your waking up. And I think that as we progress in 2025, I think it's very important to be very intentional about that, about setting boundaries with our mobile devices.
Yeah,
um, so, because we need to be present, we need to be, we owe it to our children, and we owe it to our partner, or to our coworkers, to be present, and not be absent-minded, or not be just thinking. And it's a whole, this, from your work in wellness, there's that whole dopamine, right? About, the immediate satisfaction of looking at your phone and whatever the case might be. But we need to really be very intentional to set boundaries with our phones, and just keep them away, to teenagers nowadays are instructed to, put the cell phone in the trunk of the vehicle. So, end up, having that, need to driving while you're using it. So
Yeah.
um, it's important that we do that. We talk about that, and that we model that behavior, ourselves as leaders, saying, hey, it's okay to use your cell phone, but it doesn't need to be a 24/7 endeavor.
Yeah. You know, I had to come to this realization because I think with anything, any sort of escapism, whether that is your cell phone or any other unhealthy, maybe escaping mechanism. So drinking, gambling, shopping or overspending. Like there's a lot of things, and even overworking could be
Mhm.
another thing, like that you're maybe trying to escape some sort of reality and maybe not go home. And there were two things that I realized. One is asking myself, why am I doing these things? Is it because I'm trying to escape reality? Is it because I'm trying to avoid my life or maybe something hard that I'm going through that I don't want to process? What is the reason why I am, using these maybe escapism type behaviors? And then the second thing I realized, and this was like, because I was on Instagram all the time. And I had a moment where, because everyone's going to say, I don't have time. Always. If we're saying, hey, like maybe read a book, they're like, I don't have time. Or hey, maybe go to the gym, I don't have time. Or hey, like meal prep, I don't have time. Right. But you do have time to scroll on Instagram for like 3 hours a day. Right. If you look at your phone use. And so there was a moment where I had been scrolling and I was really busy and I was kind of stressed and I was thinking I didn't have time. And an hour went by. I like blinked and I looked up because I was in like this vortex of, like sucked into my phone
Oh,
of like Instagram. And I was like, hold on, like, whoa, first of all, that was a huge waste of time. But I also asked myself, did I learn anything or did I benefit from that last hour? And what I realized, and if anyone takes that moment to kind of like disconnect and say, hey, like, aside from maybe like some entertainment, like maybe you saw like a funny video that like made you laugh, whatever. I didn't learn anything. It didn't help me grow. It didn't improve me in any way. I just lost an hour of my life watching people get ready. Like get ready with me videos or
yeah.
like whatever, And so one of the things that's really been helpful because it actually is an addiction that they're starting to find. Like your brain becomes addicted to that dopamine. And
Yes.
there's a grayscale that you can put on your phone, and you are far less likely to look at these things if your phone is on grayscale. So that might be something if you're like, oh, like I just can't put it down. That might be a strategy. But I don't want to get too far off topic. I know we're running out of time, so I do want to ask you one final question. If you could go back to the very beginning of your career and you could give yourself advice as a brand new officer in this career, what words of wisdom would you share? Someone who's earlier in their career, maybe something that you wish you would have known that you know now, or something that has helped you along the way.
Oh, that's a great question. And I think, yeah, I'm gonna probably gonna have to think a little bit about that because um, in the big scheme of things, sometimes people ask me, do you regret, some of the things that you did when you were young? And the bottom line is, no, I really don't regret anything. I enjoy every minute of my 25, 26 years career in law enforcement. So I have no regrets. I think, the advice that I would give a young person coming in, a young me, would be to be more relational, be more, establish better relationships with, um, the people that you're serving, the people that you're working with, and your own family circle. Again, I think I mentioned it before that I neglected my family, neglected my partner for many years. And it was, it's something that if I could tell somebody to do that is, no, don't, if you don't have to be here, go enjoy your son's, recital at school, or go enjoy the kids, little league game. Um, Go ahead and do that because as I grow older, I realize that there's certain things that are never coming back, right? Your children are only gonna be 5, 6, 7 years old one time only, and the opportunities to spend quality time with your partner um, are only going to be there for a certain amount of time. So I think that would be my number one advice. And again, recognizing that we are first responders, that we are going to be there when um, in extreme cases of emergency, and then we have chosen this professional to do that. But when you can, allow yourself to spend time with your family, your extended family, your parents, whatever the case might be. But I think it's something that's very important that I wish um, I would have done earlier on. So, as a leader now, I definitely always try to accommodate, the request when people, approach you and say, "Hey, I'm gonna need, I need, time for, vacation or whatever the case might be." I will, try to do whatever I can to accommodate those requests so you can spend time with your family. The more quality time you spend with your family away from work, I know it's gonna be correlational to the quality time you're gonna have here at work. That if you are, um, you know, 100% with your family at home, then you can be 100% when you're here at work. Because that's also important. You can have an effective police officer if his or her mind is away at what the event that she's missing or he's missing. So it kind of it's something that needs to be worked out um, in advance, but it's something that it's important to recognize that, and we as leaders have to try to accommodate as much as we can of that time for their own um, mental health, wellness, and emotional wellness and overall wellness.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your insights and your words of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I definitely enjoy our chat, and if I can ever be of service, please feel free to reach out to me. I think this is a great conversation. I look forward to seeing your continuous work in the wellness space and with our first responder community. So
Thank
thank
you.
you very much for the invitation and keep up the good work.
Thank you. I appreciate it.